for since Saskatchewan and since settlement, but it really came back to the forefront of our society. Just a quick note too, we have a recording going on here, so I just want to click that. So when that happened and the tensions were so high in our province and really kind of in our face again, it really, a lot of Indigenous peoples felt very unsafe, myself included, my family members. There was a lot of discussions about how we are unsafe in our own homelands and traditional territories when we are living Indigenous lifestyles, meaning hunting, gathering, medicine picking, being on the land, and just living and just traveling. Even just, ending up on the side of the road with a flat tire, there was a sense of feeling very unsafe in our homelands. And of course, at that time, shortly after that verdict came down in Saskatchewan, the trespassing laws were modified. And so that really created a sense too of unease and a feeling of, really, really fueling a lot of the tensions in our province. And so when this was happening, those trespassing signs and the no trespassing signs and the no trespassing laws being bolstered, it was a sense of working together to have settler societies, settler descendants push back against that. And the idea was instead of having no trespassing signs for neighbors who wanted to push back against that rhetoric and push back against this and do something about it, to really honor the intent of treaties, which was to share the land and to mutual benefit. And so it was really to have a place where Indigenous people would feel safe to access our homelands and territories, because these were lands that were never ceded, that were never given up. We did negotiate treaty, and over time, historical and contemporary policy has made it difficult for Indigenous peoples to access land safely. And so that's just a little bit of context, was the tensions of the province at the time that have always been there, but it really hit a really heightened, tension-filled time. And so the Treaty Land Sharing Network was kind of born out of that time to really push back against this sense of divisiveness between settler and Indigenous societies and communities, and to instead foster more relationship building and sharing land as the treaties intended. So that is the intention. And the network has grown from a very small group of people, and we're growing more and more every year. And basically what it means is if you sign on to the network, to the Treaty Land Sharing Network as a landholder, if you have ranch land, farmland, an acreage, any kind of land where you could provide access to Indigenous peoples, that you can sign on to the network, and then basically you are sharing your land with those of us who gather medicines, pick plants, and berries, and go hunting and use the land, going gathering sweat rocks, all the different purposes and uses that we as Indigenous people access lands, that you are opening that and sharing that as is intended. The other thing to keep in mind is that the privatization of land in Saskatchewan, we have the highest amount of privatized land in the country. And over the years, accessing lands, so crown lands and publicly held lands, has been harder and harder. A lot of crown lands have been privatized, and so it's getting more and more difficult for Indigenous peoples to access those lands. And so this is a way as well to increase that access, and to not wait as well for government and government policy to change before taking action. This is a grassroots movement of settlers and Indigenous descendants to come together and look at the treaties and say, how can we honor these agreements and live that in real time today without waiting for government or others to create that change? And really, that is how change is created, is from that grassroots community building from the ground up. So that's a little bit of the Treaty Land Sharing Network in a nutshell, about how it came about, the reasoning behind it. And there's a lot of things that we do in the network as well, a lot of education, treaty education, reaching out to the members who are landholders and sharing treaty knowledge, and really kind of, from fumbling our way forward in a sense, because these are difficult relationships. We have difficult conversations, but we all come with full hearts and in doing our best to find ways forward. And it's an amazing group of people. And I'm very proud and honored to spend time with those who are on the coordinating committee and those who have contributed their efforts, and those of you who have signed up as well. So on a personal note, I'm very grateful for all of those who are part of the network. And thank you for all of you who have joined here today to learn more. So with that, there will be some time to answer some questions at the end. And if you have any questions as we go along, please pop those into the chat, and I'll do my best to take a look at that and answer your questions as we go along, and at the end as well. So the topic for tonight is demystifying Indigenous hunting. One of the things that we've come across is that when people sign up or show interest in signing up to the network to share land, they have questions about hunting and what that means. And often people, understand, medicine and berry picking and gathering sweat rocks or use for ceremonial purposes, but might have some other concerns. And so we wanted to share a little bit of information and answer your questions, and just share that information and keep this conversation going. As we get started, I also just want to take a quick moment to thank the Faculty of Arts at the University of Regina for supporting the work that we do and supporting this webinar this evening so that we could host all of you here tonight. So for our panel, I'll be moderating, so I'm just here to say introductions and to welcome all of you, give some background on the network, and I will just have a conversation with our panel members and with many of you at the end if you ask questions and put your hand up. So we're joined today with Shirley Wolfe-Keller from Fishing Lake, and she is a hunter and our knowledge keeper that guides us and helps us in a good way here at the Treaty Land Sharing Network. And we're also joined by Brian Seesequasis as well. They're going to be sharing from an Indigenous hunting perspective and answering many questions. And we're also joined by Tom Harrison, who is one of our Treaty Land Sharing Network members. And he is sharing his land and can answer questions as well of that experience as being a landholder and sharing as well. Before we get too much further in, at the Treaty Land Sharing Network, when we have meetings and gatherings, we always like to start things in a good way. And we often have opening remarks and just a bit of a blessing. And so I would like to call on our knowledge keeper, Shirley Wolfe-Keller, if she could help to open our conversation in a good way this evening. Shirley, can you do that for us today?
Thank you, Michelle. As I always do with all the other meetings, I did my opening prayer before I got on the phone this evening. And with that, I do it in my language, and I offer tobacco. And so that's how I do it. But I will just give a little bit I'll give a little bit away from my language to the group and the committee here this evening. I have asked Creator to bless us with a good meeting, to bless us with respect, to bless us with understanding, and to bless us to remember to be considerate of one another. And whatever we remember out there in our growing up years, our grandfathers, our parents, grandmothers, anywhere that we have been taught from, and to have those teachings as a treaty First Nation woman, I have been raised with those teachings and taught those ways. So I share that with all my brothers and sisters that are non-native as well, and all walks of life. For us to gather, it's such of an important meeting. Minamamo, Witsitiing. See, I'm talking in my language and I kind of forgot the word, but I say it every day. And that is helping one another, all helping one another in a good way. And that's what I asked for tonight. We talk treaties. Treaties are extremely important to us, as when our ancestors signed those treaties, they believed, and we still do today as time goes on, that Creator was witnessing the signature or the pat or the handshake of those treaties. So they are very important to us, the land, the water, the fires, the wind, the air, seasons, and walkers, flyers, crawlers, swimmers, all of that. That's very important to us. We are human on this earth. And if we were to all disappear, the world would go on with everything they've got here, everything that was created and put on earth. But if one of the things like water was taken and we had no water, there wouldn't be no earth. We all die, and earth itself would not continue to evolve. So this is how important we believe in our treaties and the signing of our treaties, and what the message and the teachings are in those treaties. There's a lot of sharing talked about in a good way. There's a lot of respect. There's a lot of kindness, and there's values and beliefs. All of that I talked about in my prayer this evening. So with that, I will let it there and hope that we have a good meeting and we respect one another. And there's a lot of good values and good ideas and a lot of good skills around the table. Let's utilize them tonight to the best we can and to the most that we can. I care about you all, and we can do this together. Minomamo wichitin nung gumstakstine the mingmiwe. Make great. Yeah, thank you.
For Miigwech. Thank you so much, Shirley. I so appreciate that, and I appreciate you. And just wanting to share too, we start in that way all of the time to really honor the intent and how we like to move forward in the network. When it comes to building relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples on Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 territories, it's really important to remember that we come from very different perspectives and worldviews. And an Indigenous worldview, we have these deeper relationships with the lands. It's our relatives. We speak of our plant relatives and all the various plant nations, our animal relatives, the water, all of the spirits there that we live with and that we honor, and that we live in relationship with. And so we approach things in a different manner. And I'm also of mixed ancestry, so I have Indigenous and non-Indigenous family, and there's different ways. And so we're always looking to share those ways and learn from one another. And so getting back to the land, having access to the land, we always have to remember that relationship that we have, which is very different from a lot of my friends that are in settler descendant friends that are farmers and ranchers and have different relationships. And so we're always just here to learn from one another and understand those different perspectives and come together in mutual respect and seek understanding of one another. So with that, I do want to introduce everybody that we have on our panel this evening. We just heard from Shirley Wolfe-Keller. We have Brian Seesequasis here and Tom Harrison. I'm going to ask each of you just to introduce yourselves, share a little bit of who you are, and with Brian and Shirley, how you came into hunting, a little bit about your hunting experience, and then Tom, how you came into ranching. Brian, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you. If you could just introduce yourself and say a few words, please.
All right, good evening, Michelle, and to the rest of the party. My name is Brian Seesequasis. I work for Beardy's First Nation, and I am from Beardy's. I work as a land manager for Beardy's for 19 years now, and I've also worked in the community pasture there. I've lived on Beardy's basically all my life. And I guess the other part about the hunting stuff, I guess we can get to that part, later after everybody's introductions. Is that correct? Is that what you want me to do?
Yes, that's correct, Brian. Thank you.
And as well, I'm in the Treaty 6 area too.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for joining us this evening. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Shirley, can you share a little bit about yourself, where you're from? And
Yes, thank you. Shirley Wolfe-Keller. I'm originally from the Muskowekwan First Nation, but I did transfer back in the 80s to Fishing Lake First Nation, where I do have relatives, and as well, this is where some of my children are are registered to. I have two sons that are registered to myself, and that's in Treaty 4. I have relatives in Treaty 6 as well. I'm retired. I'm 75 years old. I love to share my age because not many people can have reached 75, as I've lost a daughter 2 weeks before her 22nd birthday in 1995, and I've lost a lot of younger people in my family that have not reached even the 70s. But I'm grateful to be here. I'm a retired social worker, therapist, teacher. I've also been elected chief for 2 different reserves, Muskowekwan and Fishing Lake, at different times. So I made history back in those days, like 15, 20 years ago. And I'm very proud of that. My life as a social worker and therapist has prepared me well to be in a political way where people are not so nice. And yes, you do have your good people, but there's a lot of turmoil in politics. So I knew how to work with people, and that was a good thing for me. I've always very connected to the treaties. My late uncle, was a treaty-driven person, so that's where I've heard the treaties from, and that's where I've learned a lot from my uncle and my grandmother, not so much from my mother and aunt in those areas because they were boarding school products, and they went off reserve and worked in the off reserve setting for many years. So with that, I have 7 children. I've lost a daughter, so I have 6 adults. I raised a grandson, and I have 18 grandchildren and 18 great-grandchildren. So I'm really rich in that area, rich with traditional family and with my way of life. And when I joined the Treaty Land Sharing Network, it was a place I wanted to be. It brought home a lot of my childhood upbringing, and I'm here. I'd love to share, and I'd love to help in whichever way I could. And I'm learning every day. Thank you very much. I know I did a little longer than I should have here. I'm a great talker. Sometimes I repeat myself too much, but thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Shirley. We always appreciate your contributions. So, Tom, tell us about you, if you can introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Thanks, Michelle, and say hi to good to hear from Shirley and good to hear from Brian as well. We, when I say we, my wife and my daughter, myself, run a grass-based operation. Our home place is located about 10 miles north of Lumsden, and we have land sort of spread out around Lumsden and over near a town called Earl Grey, and then we do have some land in the southwest part of the province. Like I mentioned, we have a grass-based operation, and having a grass-based operation means everything's in permanent cover, and all our grasslands and bushlands are retained, and that provides wonderful habitat for wildlife, including like around where we live, where our home base is. Lots of mule deer, sharptail, huns, and over by Earl Grey, it's a little bit more aspen parklandish. Elk, moose, whitetail are there, and we run a herd of mainly Angus cows, but we do have a small bunch of speckled parks in there as well too. And you know, the reason we're involved in this is that, you know, we value not only the cattle industry, but, you know, we're really interested in the environment and providing habitat for wildlife, especially in an environment where we see lots of grasslands, lots of woodlands being lost to development and to you know, annual crop, or not to demonize the annual cropping sector, but it is a reality of the markets that are out there right now. So, and by having these wildlife habitats, we have strive to be open and allow, you know, both Indigenous and recreational hunters come out to our place, and other groups too. We've for years we've had school groups coming out to our place and learning what it's like to have, where your food comes from. And I think that's always an important uh, educational piece. So anyways, I'll stop there, Michelle, and let you get on with it.
Great. Thank you, Tom. We always appreciate you. Shirley and Brian, I'd like to start with you two. We want to get onto the meat of the discussion here this evening. Brian, I'll start with you this evening. Just tell us a bit about hunting and accessing land, and just your experience as a hunter, as an Indigenous hunter in Treaty 6 and Treaty 4 territories, or wherever. Just what is that experience like for you? Have you had challenges accessing land? What are some of the barriers? I'll kind of ask a very open-ended question here and just share a little bit about your experience as an Indigenous hunter.
Right, Michelle. Well, I guess on my part, I did experience, at times difficulty accessing some land, but for the most part, I'd say I've had a fairly easy access, I guess. Part of it is, I guess, my job too, because I work as a land manager, so I know a lot of farmers surrounding area. We have land in the Big Quill area, also the Blaine Lake Leask area, as well as surrounding Duck Lake and Rostern area. So I know a lot of farmers. I used to be a pasture manager at one time, so there again, I know a lot of farmers outside the reserve. So that kind of sort of like an advantage, I guess, on my part to the rest of my band members, that I know so many of them know me. I'm usually able to have access to hunting land quite favorably, I guess you could say. But there is times where I do meet the odd farmer that probably doesn't know me, and they're usually not too sure. And, they do say no, having access to their land. And I do respect that when they do say, they don't approve it. It is their land too, that they have their reasons. You mentioned some of the stuff earlier that caused that tension amongst, both parties, I guess. They're unsure of somebody coming into their yard. So those kinds of things have created some of the problems. The other problems I've had for accessing hunting land, I guess, would be the provincial and what used to be federal community pastures, because that's land that once used to be open. Once the livestock were taken out, the land was open for hunting. Now the governments, provincial and federal, have handed those community pastures over to the pasture patrons, and they run the pastures. And these last few years, I've noticed that pastures every gate is locked. Like band members, nobody can get in there unless they can contact the pasture manager or whoever farmer is supervising that pasture. So the area I'm talking about as a community pasture near us would be the Wingard community pasture. We used to hunt in there often, and we haven't gone there now for quite a few years, not only myself, but the other band members, because they ask questions about it. Mainly because I work as a land manager, so they expect me to find some answers for them. So I could speak not only for myself, but the band members that I work with. They do have lots of problems accessing hunting areas. For myself, because I'm able to access a fair amount of it, and also as my job, what I've done in the past few years is I do this annual treaty rights to hunting workshop that we host every February, and I have 2 conservation officers come in. I also have one of the elders that used to be with the FSIN. And we have an open evening forum with the conservation officers. Sometimes we have maybe the local RCMP, one officer come in, and the whole evening we discuss treaty rights and hunting rights, what we do. Conservation officers, I have them there so that they can explain to the band members what does happen, what laws do affect them. Then I also have on the other side a person talking about treaty hunting rights, what rights they have under treaty. So those kind of forums has kind of helped to try to help people understand, I guess, both sides of it. I guess for my part, I can see both sides of the situation, and it helps me sometimes get access to hunting areas.
Right.
Places do have access to hunting. But being kind of lucky that way, I guess, fortunate. There is times occasionally where I do meet the stumbling block and I can't have access to certain areas.
Brian, have you noticed over the years that it has become more difficult to access lands? Like if you think a number of years, and you mentioned it already with the federal pastures, pasture lands. But have you too found that it has been increasingly less access to lands?
Yes, definitely, especially after when the province pushed for the trespassing laws, I guess. That has made it more difficult to access hunting land. I guess I know with tonight's presentation I'm supposed to speak about myself, what my experiences are, but because of my job I can speak on behalf of others as well too. So on my part, I did experience some difficulties, but for the most part I don't. But many other band members that do come and see me, because of my job, they do have difficulty accessing. It's gotten worse, I guess, is what I could say, for having access to hunting land. And as I mentioned earlier, many people, when they see somebody pull into their yard, they're just unsure. Not only because of what took place a number of years ago, you mentioned that incident that took place, but this day and age now today, we all know of the drugs and alcohol problems like everywhere. There's a lot of break and enters that take place. There's lots of thefts that take place on, farmyards, abandoned farmyards, that kind of stuff. So the people are never sure who's showing up at their place, and that's part of also the reason that makes it difficult to have access to hunting area. People in general, I guess society has created that problem as well too.
Brian, are you able to speak just a bit? I'm going to move on to Shirley in just a moment here. But a sense of safety, like you just kind of naturally moved into that, like, pulling into someone's yard and people aren't sure. As an Indigenous hunter and with those that you speak to, have you noticed over the years, has it always felt unsafe in certain areas, or has that increased, say, in recent years, of feeling unsafe when accessing lands for hunting and other purposes that we go on the land for?
Well, it has increased in the last few years, I would say. It has increased. I guess, like Shirley, I'm not afraid to give my age. I'm 66 now. I'll be 67 in a week's time. I've hunted pretty well all my life. I've learned my hunting from my cousin, Norman, got me started in that, and that's how I learned. But back in the years when I was younger, when I used to go hunting with him, it was kind of like a comparison to then. Today, we hunted everywhere. When I went with him, we hunted everywhere. Land was available, access to them anywhere. Even the Nisbet Forest was not a problem to go hunting, and now today it is. But there is a big difference from back then, what I've experienced when I started hunting with him, to the present day today when I go out hunting on my own. And I take my nephews sometimes, or I take my grandsons with me. My daughters sometimes come with me. So there is not as easy to access hunting areas like it used to. Definitely has changed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian. Shirley, tell me a bit about your experience. Have you noticed as well, as a hunter, access to land changing over the years? How do you access land, and any barriers that you faced over time?
Oh, yes, for sure. Land is not so easily accessible now. And years ago, I started hunting long ago when I was young. I didn't really go out, take a gun, but I went along with my family. And when my sons started hunting, then my grandsons, well, I was hunting then. So I taught them what their father and myself taught them, what we were taught growing up, and that was to be responsible hunters. And that was to just not go anywhere and hunt. You need to ask, if you're going to a place to hunt, make sure that place is okay and that you can hunt there, and nobody's going to come to you and tell you you're not able to hunt here, for whatever reason, to respect that. So they are respectful hunters, and they do follow. They have good values, and they do follow rules. We have the province, and of course we have treaty rights as well, which are very important. But our treaty rights allow us to, we sign treaties to hunt, gather, fish, and trap. When I was very young, I was about 5 years old when I first set out a trap with my mom and my auntie, and I caught a weasel and I caught a squirrel. So I helped skin and dry these pelts. I didn't do all of that. I was 5 years old, but I did that. I took them to the store in Lestock. We had a big department store there that sold everything, food, clothes, and whatnot. So I took them there, and I got 25 cents for my 2 pelts, and I was so proud, and I never forget this. I bought an Orange Crush pop. I bought a big Lucky Elephant popcorn and a Sweet Marie chocolate bar from my 25 cents. Today you would need about $25 to buy all of that. But anyway, the whole thing was, I went out to hunt. I knew what the hunting was about. It wasn't to waste. It wasn't to kill. For enjoyment. It was for me to be able to get that experience, to be able to respect that and to learn that, and also take my hunting. There was work that had to be done, so I helped with cleaning up and skinning whatever I could at 5 years old, then taking it to the store and getting a reward for what I have done for these pelts. And I knew those pelts were going somewhere for some kind of use out there. So that was my first hunting experience. Then I went on to snare. Trapping I didn't do. After that, I didn't do much, but I did snare. Then I went to hunting ducks and geese and deer and elk and moose. So that's where I started, and it was all sustenance. It wasn't for trophy. It wasn't for fun. And as years ago, time immemorial, our ancestors that were put on this earth were put on this earth with animals as well, so they could live in harmony and balance with these animals and ducks and fish and whatnot. So I was taught to take what you can and not to waste. It was a no to waste. It was not good to wound an animal. If you're not sure of your shot, don't shoot. But if you shoot and you wound an animal, you go out and you look for it till you can't find it, and there's just nothing else you can do. So for those reasons, wounding an animal was wrong. And to use everything that we could use from that animal to clean up after yourself and make sure that wherever you killed that animal, you took everything out of there and left it the way that you had gotten there. And the offering of tobacco and giving thanks to the Creator and for that animal spirit is very important, and this is what we do. I taught my sons to do this, my grandsons do it, and I'm sure they'll carry it on. It gives them a sense of pride. It gives them a sense of value. It gives them a sense of honesty and caring for their brothers, the four-legged, and to give that respect and giving thanks for them eating the food, the meat that this animal has given, and that's life. Food is life, so everything is really involved in all of that. And my hunting times back in when my children were young, we would go out to hunt. We had to drive away from home because there's not much on the reserves. Our reserve was small, and there was no moose and elk. There was deer, but really we had to drive. We had to drive a ways to harvest. We pick as well berries and medicines if we were to. And so driving out was maybe an hour, 2 hours sometimes. And some of the farmers we knew, and we would go in and ask them. It was not a problem. It was always a very friendly thing. There was no fear of a farmer coming out to shoot you or or do anything that was going to harm you. And there was no fear for that farmer to come out of his home and see a car pull up and with Indigenous people, and it was a friendly encounter. So there was really none of that. As the years went by, it got to a time where hunting started to be. It was more of a search for land to hunt because of the province and their laws as well. And it was couldn't go to the crown lands unless, of course you can hunt on crown lands, but some of these crown lands are now owned by farmers or are leased by farmers, so they have cattle in them, and of course you can't go out and hunt where there's cattle in any farmer's area. That's something that Indigenous people know and should be following that, and if they're not, then they're breaking that law, and I have not really haven't seen any of that. I know I can speak for my sons and my grandsons. They follow rules, and they follow also the natural law rules of our Indigenous ways, as well as following what provincial has out there and federal law. So today it's not. Today we have to go further for animals. Our hunting areas are not so close. Our hunting areas some of them are not hunting areas anymore because of the pasture lands, as Brian has shared. That's exactly true for us out here in the Wadena area. Absolutely true for us out here. And now we have to be, and my grandsons and my sons are careful as to where they go. They need to know, build a relationship and know the farmers that they're going to before they will even, go out there to ask them. If they can get a phone number, they phone. They'll talk on the phone and they'll meet and they'll get to know one another. And this is how, this is how they get to build that relationship as well, getting not only a verbal okay to hunt on the land, but also getting written permission. I've had to get written permission because I felt that this was something that needed to be done, and not just a verbal okay that I can hunt in those lands. So that works well as well, but the fear of going to farmers' yards now is real. It's very real. It's real after the Boucher, after the murder and trial and all of that went on with this young man. Things have changed. Things have changed a lot, and there's been trespassing laws, I think, as well. It's very scary. We have people are hunters. Indigenous hunters are afraid to go into yards. They're afraid to even be near farmers because of the threat of they might be shot. And they have been threatened. Indigenous people have been threatened, hunters, with from farmers that were going to, if they come any closer around the areas or farmlands, that they would, they get shot. And that was pulled right out to some of these hunters. So they're afraid, and I don't don't take that lightly. I fear for them. I'm afraid. I have hunters as well, and I'm afraid of those other hunters. And we need to have something that's a lot safer. And from the farmers' point of view, I can see that if they're afraid, what has caused them to be afraid? What has happened to them that as soon as someone pulls into their yard, they're going to pull their weapons out and start shooting. What has happened? Why is it that way? And it never used to be that way. And I understand there's a lot of wildness out there with drugs and alcohol and theft, but that's a problem in itself. But this is I really feel this should be looked at in a different way, and I think that can be done. I'm getting too old to hunt now, but I'm certainly going to help in sharing and teaching and helping whatever I could do to build relationships and have a good, healthy relationship with the non-native farmers and the native people. We need to work on those so we can be safe. We don't want any accidents, or we don't want any intended hurt on anyone. That's just not how it should be. So things have changed, yes. And I think Brian touched a lot on that. I too have, I too worry about and I have seen. So I don't know if there's something else that I should be, and no overkilling. We've always taught our sons and grandsons that they cannot overkill. They don't overkill, because that's all about harmony and balance. What's going to be left there for the grandchildren or for those yet unborn? So overkilling is a no-no, and I've seen it myself happen in our area here, where Indigenous people come from Manitoba, and for whatever reason they're coming from Manitoba to this area, which is okay. Can't stop them from coming to hunt. This is treaty. They have treaty. They can hunt. That's okay. But in the treaties, it never says in any of the number treaties that you can go out and hunt and kill as many as you can kill. And I don't know what they do with the meat or with all. There was a trailer with 11 moose on it, and it was actually 2 trailers, and there was 11 moose, and that's a lot of meat, and that's a big load. But that had come a few years ago. It might have been 4 or 5 years ago, and had been seen here, and Indigenous people in our area were very concerned, and they phoned wherever they can. They did whatever they thought they could do to stop this. Unfortunately, when you have treaty rights, you can hunt anywhere you want. Like I said, though, you've got to help for sustenance. You want to help and just take what you need, not overtake and not overkill. And that's just common sense. And that's our laws. That's our natural laws as Indigenous people. I guess it's up to we as Indigenous people to bring that out and to bring it to our chiefs and councils, to bring it to other communities so they can help and to stop this. If it could be stopped, it's something that's not right. But other than that, yes, safety hunt, going out to hunt safely is not 100%. It's probably not even 50%. I feel everybody, and I'm saying 50%, is people feel that they're not safe to go to these places. They clear away from them. There has not been many hunters going out to where they used to hunt in previous years, because the lands are no longer available to hunt. They quit asking. We don't have Indigenous pasture man anywhere out here, or pasture woman. We have so there isn't really, and it's not an easy go-to, so you can get that opportunity to hunt. So many times people just give up and they go elsewhere, and it comes to a point where they give up and they don't have what they should have, what they should be hunting for sustenance, for food, for their life, for their family. We don't have that. So until something is, I guess we just continue to either give up or find different places to go, which means traveling many miles to go to get that. I'm not sure if I know provincial laws, yes, are a part of all of this as well. I think I've said, unless something comes about. Is there anything else that I may have missed? or
No, you've been
like,
extreme.
okay.
Shirley, thank you so much. I mean, there were so many questions that I had for you, and you've answered so much there. I really appreciate your story of how you started hunting, your teachings that were given to you, your perspective, the concerns of the laws, and then the concerns of the safety as well. And I really wanted to just thank you for your contribution there. The safety issue, that's one of the key things when we talk about the Treaty Land Sharing Network in our meetings and in our gatherings, and it's one of the motivating factors of this network being started. It's about sharing the land as treaty intended, building these relationships, increasing that access, but increasing safe access for Indigenous peoples to access our traditional homelands and territories. And when you talked about being unsafe, I remember after 2018 when the Stanley verdict came down, I was terrified of the experience that my son would have. He's a boy with a braid, and I was concerned about him being out on the land and what's his future going to be, and to not have any place to go. For this to happen in our homelands is so hurtful on a deep level. And I remember berry picking one time, and I used to berry pick at this one place all the time. And after that summer, I was picking, and every time a vehicle went by, my heart just stopped. I just would hold my breath for a moment. And to be in a place where you're out in the sun, you're with the birds, you're picking berries, you're on the land, it should be the most calming, safe, natural place for a human to be. But to be out there and to be terrified of what could happen is a truly awful experience. And I don't know that most settler descendant people understand have that experience. I've talked to a lot and haven't had that experience whereas a lot of Indigenous peoples that access land, we have that. So I thank you for sharing all of that. Tom, you've been sitting here. I know you're such a one of our main contributors to the network. And on the safety issue, we've had a lot of discussions about this as well. Can you share your experience with becoming a member of the network, sharing your land, having Indigenous peoples come, whether they're hunting or gathering, but we're talking hunting tonight, just what your experience has been that way, and what you kind of do to help ensure safety and.
Right. Yeah. So thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I think it's been 4 years that I've been involved with the Treaty Land Sharing Network. And my first experience was right after I joined. A fella contacted me within weeks, I think, of us posting our land on the website. And he was a fellow that had just moved down from Lac La Biche. And my understanding is like where he was traditionally hunting and his family hunted and fished. That was all forested land. There was really nobody you had to access. You didn't have to ask for permission or that. So he was just trying to get a feel of the landscape down south here. And so, when he came and he phoned and he asked me about it, I said, yeah, sure, just come out. And his first visit was just to see the lay of the land. And he brought his kids out and his wife, and I said, yeah, go wherever you want, just hike around, I don't care. And he did that. And then he's been a repeat visitor, on several occasions over the last 4 years. And he's actually referred some of his, friends out to our place as well too. And one of his friends was a young fellow that I'm pretty sure he's in his early 20s. He wanted to shoot something for food. And when he was done, he sent me a picture of himself with a young bull moose. And he was really respectful, and he got what he wanted. He got something that was young, something that was good for meat, and that's what he wanted. And he seemed pretty happy with it. And so those are the kind of experiences that I've had so far. We haven't been overrun with land users from the First Nation standpoint. We have both Indigenous and recreational hunters. Most experiences are all good. When it comes to safety, like, you know, when you sign up for the Treaty Land Sharing Network, you're actually giving permission. You know, like you don't have to ask to come out to my place. You have permission to come out with a place. Here's a safe place to hunt, or practice any of the other things, the berry picking, the rock collecting, whatever you want to do. But I do ask a couple things. I ask that, you know, that they text me ahead of times, and that's primarily that they have you know, one, they have almost written correspondence with me. They can just, anybody questions them, they can pop their phone up and they can see that they've been texting with me. But the other thing is the safety of my animals. Our land over at Earl Grey is divided into 4 fields. Generally speaking, the cows are in one of the 4 fields. So I tell them which field the cows are in, and it's probably best. And if they want to hunt, be successful in their hunt, they're probably going to be more lucky enough to get something in the other 3 fields. What I noticed anyways, the moose and the elk tend to move away from where the herd of cows is. So, you know, I want to make sure that, you know, my animals are safe from you know, being accidentally shot. And we do have other people out there as well. Like I did mention that we do have other hunters, and we do have I've had other people coming out too, just to, you know, either hike or, you know, for whatever reason. And you want to make sure that, you know, if they're coming out there, they know that somebody may be else out there, and, you know, we don't want them to shoot each other, and that's not always a good scene. So so like, yeah, safety has always been front and center, but it's not a, you know, when they're asking that, you know, it's not a means of asking for permission. We've already granted permission to this. So, and the other thing is, you know, walking on foot. I prefer people, you know, both recreational and Indigenous hunters to access our place on foot. I feel that's a better experience for them. And you know, I used to be a hunter too. I always did everything on foot, and that was part of the experience of hunting for me anyway. So so I'll leave it at that and let you carry on.
Mhm. Good. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, and I appreciate the points that you brought up. One of the things that we always share with anybody accessing Treaty Land Sharing Network lands or becoming a member to share land is just what you pointed out, that it's not about Indigenous peoples calling to seek permission. The permission is already granted, and that's made very clear when people sign on. But that it really is also too about ensuring safety, which takes many forms. Sometimes there's electric fence, or there might be an old well, or there might be hostile neighbors. There may be livestock. There are other safety issues there. But we always make sure we focus on the general safety of the land, but especially when it comes to neighbors and that kind of thing, like to communicate. Because we have had some experiences too where people have gone, say, sage picking in the summer, and they've gone to access lands, but the neighbors, you know, might drive by slowly. And this is the reality that we've had to face, and that we share with those who are signing onto the network, to really reiterate just how serious and how hostile it can be as an Indigenous person out on the land in rural Saskatchewan, in Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 territory. And that it's not just about providing access to land, but providing safe access to land. And that also includes communicating anything that could be putting people in potential danger. Also making sure that they have the right space, making sure the location is clearly communicated so that you are on the right place that you're meant to be, and not accidentally on somebody else's land, especially if it is bordering somebody who would have, say, no trespassing signs posted and be hostile to people coming by, or just not open to that. And as well, we talked to about our rights and conservation officers and who can call. Like you said, there's a written account of if they are approached by somebody, that there is that there. So we talk a lot too about how to increase safety and the feeling, not the feelings of safety, but real safety as well. So those are deep discussions that we have in the network. So thank you for that. Brian, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about, Shirley had touched on this in her sharing, just on kind of your teachings and a little bit about your approach to hunting when it comes to, we talked about kind of that ceremonial approach, how it may differ from non-Indigenous or hunters, but just your approach, if you could just share a little bit about, your knowledge there, natural law, some of our responsibilities as well as Indigenous hunters to the land and to hunt responsibly, not just with legal rights and our rights, but also our own natural laws and teachings.
I guess Shirley touched on lots of good points there. Her and I obviously share the same things when listening to her. I guess my approach to hunting that I try to share with my daughters, my grandchildren, nephews, my nieces, and anyone that I work with for hunting is like, they take only what they need. Listening to Shirley, that story of all those moose that were shot, I've seen that, I experienced that as well too. We try to teach, to take only what they need, what is required for themselves or their family. I've seen a few people, I've done it myself as well, to sometimes take 2 deer or 2 elk, but only because someone in a family has asked for some, and that's how we try to share it, because there's some families that just don't have no hunting background, I guess you could say, in their family. They've kind of given it up a long time ago, and no one carried it on. So, at times we do it that way, but that's just to help somebody out. And there again, sort of myself, my nephews, whoever else that's with me all the time, like, they also share that same responsibility. We try to help other family members or someone that asks for something. You said something on the legal side of it, I guess. For as far as hunting laws, our own natural laws here, like on Beardy's, in the past, a lot of people used to go out hunting at night. Many band members used to do that a long time ago, and I remember that, and some used to use spotlights and that. But over time, our elders speaking, eventually from our chief and council, they just don't allow that, or don't condone that in any way for anyone to go out hunting at night spotlighting. There's been many people that have received charges for that because of spotlighting, because they are not a good way to hunt. It's not even called hunting, I guess. There's been some people that were charged and came to chief and council, asked for some legal assistance, legal help to get a lawyer and fight the case. But they didn't receive the help from that end because they were told that's not a way to hunt. We just don't follow that way. And as far, I guess, responsibilities, myself, because I've been a hunter all my life, I just take that responsibility on to teach my family members for hunting. Everybody, I guess, in my family, I come from a large family. There was 8 of us in a family. My parents raised a lot of other children as well, so from that large family, I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and I got all of them started in hunting. We do a lot of big game hunting. Every fall we have our annual Thanksgiving duck and goose hunt is what we call it, where we all gather, and over time the numbers increase. And we all go out and do duck hunting. We all meet at my place. We drive to the lake on our side-by-sides or quads and walk into the lake where we all sit, and we just have a good, enjoyable time of just a good family gathering. I get to see all my nieces and nephews. My 2 daughters come out, my grandsons, granddaughters, they all come out, and that's how we got started, doing that family hunt, Thanksgiving hunt. It's just an outing, really. Never a case of how many ducks or geese they can get, but it's just an outing, realizing that it can be fun too. It doesn't have to be just straight killing something all the time. And just respecting and knowing and seeing what's out there and enjoying the time. It doesn't always have to be about just hunting or killing something. But over time, that Thanksgiving hunting day that we usually have a big family gathering, a meal first, and at the end of the later in the afternoon, then we all gather and we go out. It was always the guys that did that. And that one year I changed it and I told all the guys, all my nieces, whatever, that come out, to bring your partner with you. I have 2 daughters. I don't have sons. But I also have grandsons. So I told everybody, from here on, it's going to be the girls. We go out hunting, you stand beside them, and they get to use their shotgun, and they get to shoot and hunt. That time, all my other nieces and whoever else, they all wanted to come now. So it turned out to be our ladies' Thanksgiving duck and goose hunt. We got many of them started like that. They haven't shot very many, but they sure have a good time. And, you know, being together, it's teaching them something where it's there's other values to it besides hunting and gathering. It's just an outing. You mentioned something earlier that I wanted to touch on a little bit if I can. Access, I guess, to areas for hunting. Other farmers. On my side, I guess, as a job, as a land manager, I've worked with other farmers or other people, I guess, non-First Nations, giving them permission to hunt on our land as well, too. So, because we have 72 quarters of land in the RM of Big Quill, we have 46 quarters in the RM of Leask and Blaine Lake. So I do have many non-native people in those areas that will call and ask for permission to hunt. So they're only after 1 deer, or they're after only 1 elk. They get lucky to get a tag. So they're not out there to take a lot of animals. So I'd give them permission to hunt on our land as well, too. And that's to try to create a good neighbor relationship so that they allow our band members to hunt on their land. I feel, why can't we allow them to hunt on ours too as well? Because wildlife don't stay on specific areas of land. They move here, move there, and eventually some end up on our land, some end up on their land. We need to be able to have access to them. And to be able to grant that access, I give permission to non-native hunters to, when they do call, and I say yes, they'll give me their number, and I fax them or text them permission so that they have something on hand. And that's try to create good neighbor relationship is what I do. It helps our band members when they're out there. They go and ask for permission, maybe with someone that we gave permission to hunt on our land as well too, so they say yes. So it does help that way to share both ways, I guess. But I do have a few band members that don't agree with that. They prefer to see our land as just for us to hunt on and nobody else. But they don't quite see it that, I'm trying to create something for everybody, not just for a specific few that don't want anybody on our land except us. So being part of this session tonight is kind of good because it's exactly the same thing that I try to do over here. I appreciate being invited to take part in this because I do practice some of this in some form that I can. Sharing land, our land, as well as working with others that are prepared to share their land, just like Tom.
Brian,
did I get most of it, I think?
thank you so much. Sorry, were you finished? Sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Did you have more to say?
No, I was just asking if I think I answered what you asked me.
Yes, you did. And I appreciate you sharing even about you sharing land and that relationship of reciprocity and building those relationships and not everyone agreeing with it. I know within the Treaty Land Sharing Network, we have a lot of conversations and debate a lot of issues of how do we build these relationships and do so in a way that really brings all of the different issues into the conversation. There's a lot of context of historical displacement and past and present policy, racial tensions, stereotypes, misunderstandings, and then how to go forward and not everyone seeing it the same way. And so I appreciate you sharing that perspective as well, that you do that too, because these are conversations we have here quite a bit. I wanted just a couple of things. about kind of some of the laws, some of the questions that we get sometimes about, those who have treaty rights to hunt, inherent and treaty rights to hunt, and those who don't on Indigenous hunters. So just correct me if I'm wrong anywhere, Brian, or you too, Shirley. But kind of generally speaking, just to answer some of those questions, like as Indigenous hunters who have the treaty right to hunt, that we can hunt when we want, where we want, and there aren't restrictions such as hunting season, having to enter to be drawn for a tag for a very specific animal in a very specific region. Because we have those treaty rights, we're not restricted to those particular laws, although we are restricted to our own teachings and natural laws. And then you've even heard both Brian and Shirley discuss, we have a lot of discussion there about over harvesting, and so there are other inherent governance laws that we adhere to, but is that generally the case, Brian? Because I know you do teaching, you talk about teaching treaty rights to hunting in your community, but that's essentially it for others who are curious about that.
Well, you are definitely right. Like, there is really no hunting laws or restrictions under treaty. But the only one that has really come into effect now is exactly what our topic is tonight, is the access to land.
Yeah.
That's probably the only restriction that has, one of the restrictions, I guess, that's for being able to hunt under your treaty hunting rights. When we do have our annual treaty hunting rights forum, one of the reasons we have the conservation officers there is so that people that are in our workshop are aware of what kind of laws that they're breaking or what they can be charged for. And usually, like, there's quite a few of them, but in order for the rest of those laws to be applied, the very first one usually is the trespassing one. Once somebody is caught hunting on an area where they had no permission to hunt, then usually all the other hunting charges apply too. That's the very first one that kind of gives them that able to charge for something, is that access. The trespassing one is the very first one. Mm-hmm. But we try to teach not only their treaty hunting rights, that we're correct in what you said, like there is no restrictions. You can hunt when you want, where you want, how you want, that type of thing. But at the same time, now on our elders' side, they don't like to see certain things happen. They don't like to see somebody chasing animals with a vehicle or a quad or a snowmobile, or hunting with a spotlight. They talk about all those things during our forum. It lets the young people know, like, those were not treaty things that were given to you. Treaties were signed to have that treaty right to access to hunt. There was no such thing as snowmobiles and vehicles and quads, spotlights. I was not part of it.
Well, and also having our own.
Some of the other restrictions, I guess, is the gun laws as well. Gun laws that Canada had in place, that too as well has caused, restrictions to hunting, because you have to have firearms acquisition certificate now to be able to buy firearms and buy ammunition. But that was not part of the treaty. This day, I know there's not being a First Nations that's being charged anywhere under that law. It would be challenged right away under a treaty. I've been stopped in the past by many other conservation officers, same with other band members, and the only thing they get asked for is their treaty card. They have permission to hunt. And if they're driving, I guess, their driver's license, but they're usually never asked about they have an FAC card. They won't charge them under that, because under a treaty, that was not a requirement. Firearm acquisition to have a treaty right to hunt. Shirley may have more stuff to add to that, but it's kind of like a little funny, I guess, funny story to that firearms acquisition and having ammunition. All of you have experienced celebrating your Treaty Day, annual Treaty Day. we get our $5 annual thing. But in the past, Canada used to provide ammunition. That was a normal process. A year that the law came in to have your FAC card to have ammunition, Canada was still issuing 22 shells on Treaty Day, and that got out into the news, into the media. They made a lot of big stink about it. They made a lot of fun about Canada, putting in this law, but at the same time, they were still giving First Nations ammunition. The following year, that changed. Canada changed it where if the First Nations wants to provide ammunition on Treaty Day, Canada will provide the funds for it. We just have to make that request. And then we buy the ammunition ourselves, and we can distribute it on Treaty Day. But they no longer do it that way. But it was kind of funny at the time when they put this law into place, they forgot about the Treaty Days, that they still had to give out ammunition. So that changed after that. Maybe Shirley can add something to that as well, too.
Brian, thank you for sharing all of those just different details. And I just want to also just make sure to point out, like, we just talked about some of the laws that apply or don't apply to Indigenous hunters, but also any kind of safety related laws, that kind of thing. Those all apply. Like there's common laws that like apply to all hunters, and then when we're talking about treaty rights, a lot of it is just with hunting seasons and spaces to access. And then in our comments, just a comment here too from Jade Little Chief saying that unfortunately our inherent hunting rights can be infringed upon under two situations, which is conservation and safety. So just that it's a complex area, like, and so there's a lot to learn about when it comes to what your rights are, where you can access, and just we've had conversations with conservation officers too about these laws and just making sure that people know exactly what they have the right to do and not that it comes from conservation officers, but about where those, when they'll charge or not, and then also understanding what our treaty rights are, which a lot of our leadership bring forward and that we're always challenging as well. And the other thing to kind of point out too here is understanding that our hunting rights, our land-based rights are inherent rights. They're rights that we always had living here on our homelands and territories and that we retained under treaty, which is opposed to other rights that we exchanged for sharing the land, such as education, access to healthcare, that kind of thing. So there's rights, treaty rights that we have that were granted in exchange for sharing the land. When it comes to hunting, fishing, accessing the land, those weren't granted by the Crown. Those were rights that we retained because we have the right as Indigenous peoples to live as we have on our homelands. So just nuance there sometimes are really important distinctions to make. I do want to be mindful of time, so it's 8:15, 8:16, and we are going to 8:30. I want to make sure that we have some time for questions and for any sharing as well. And also just hear any kind of closing remarks from Brian, Shirley, and Tom as well. But before we go to any closing remarks, I'll just, if anyone has any questions that they want to ask any of our panel members tonight, that you can raise your hand. We'll do some questions.
Michelle,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
can I just take a minute to, I just want to say a couple of things here.
Certainly.
If that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
and one of them is we can hunt wherever we want and wherever we want to go. Well, the treaties tell us that's the signing of the treaties, but that's not true in real life. We can't go any place to hunt. There are a lot of lands in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is 100% treaty land, but there's a lot of, within those treaty lands are rural areas where there's farmers and there's crown land, there's pasture land. We just can't go out and hunt at any time or anywhere we want. So I wanted to make that clear. And the conservation officers, I'm really recommending that they know the treaties, they learn the treaties, and before they go out into their field of work. If they know the treaties, then there'd be there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. If they know the treaties, then this would not happen, as well as our own First Nation people as well. And yes, those hunting. Another thing was hunting from vehicles. You can't hunt from vehicles. That's a no-no. We didn't have vehicles back in the time when the treaties were signed, but we have vehicles now, and that's a big safety issue. And there's a law against that. And also certain hunting times, our natural law and the law as the country as well, or the in our areas, is that you don't hunt moose, elk, deer that are in their baby's time, I will say. I don't know what word to use. I guess pregnant. So you don't hunt those animals. You let those female animals, let them live, even if they're not in the. We can. The whole point of that is give birth to their animals, so we can have animals continuously, rather than kill off all the mothers. And Brian talked about sharing. Yes, we do share, and I didn't talk about that when I talked about the many animals. People overkill. Overkill is when I meant that people do it purposely to overkill. But people will go out and harvest 2 moose maybe, and there's families that, and Brian explained that, there's families out there that don't hunt, and we are sharing people. So we share a lot of that, and that still goes on today. And there is also, we put tobacco on the ground, giving thanks. I talked about that in my family. We have a feast for the first moose that's killed, that's harvested. So these were some of the things that I just wanted to share in some of from the conversation I picked up. And yes, the licenses and everything else is really something that's there, and it does hinder our treaty rights as well. But as treaty people, we adhere to those laws of the province and the federal government.
Thank you, Shirley. I really appreciate that. Yeah, we wanted to highlight some of the different laws that apply to Indigenous First Nations hunters, treaty hunters, and non, but also like where there's overlap and then where there are differences. So thank you for highlighting a lot of that. So I wanted to move just into a couple of questions, and we have some comments in the chat as well. Christopher, you've had your hand up and you've shared quite a bit in the chat too that I wanted to share as well, but I wanted just to hear from you first. If you can,
Thanks,
you're able to.
Michelle, and just before I'll start, Chimigwech to Elder Shirley and Brian and yourself, Michelle, for the hard work the network is doing. And I guess it's really rekindling our Indigenous people's connection to the land. And, myself, I'm from the Keeper First Nation, Southeast Central Saskatchewan. I reside in BC now. I'm part of other initiatives with the National Guardians Network. But I really was active when I lived in the province, and I still come to the province. I have a son from Yellow Quill, actually. And the Trespass to Property Act has really adversely affected us as Indigenous people, getting out on the land. I've had numerous adverse experiences with kind of dubbed them the Crown's ponies, being the conservation officers that enforce the Wildlife Act, provincial legislation, and how we as Indigenous groups or nations can invoke our own law. Then we can actually preside over our jurisdiction on the nation, or even our larger traditional land use area. But I just wanted to reiterate that we are all stewards of the land. And but yeah, that's me. I know it's kind of quick, streamlined. We're running out of time, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. I really appreciate you sharing that, and for sharing just those details for sure. And also for your contributions in the chat. I really appreciate it. So if you haven't seen them yet, talking to everybody here who's on the call with us, I recommend going back. One of the things that I want to share that he had shared in the comments was just that you had shared that Indigenous harvesting is about more than just survival. It's a role of stewardship. As Indigenous people, we have an inherited right to access the land, but more importantly, we have a duty to care for it. Our ancestors maintained balance by respecting the animals, plants, and water systems that sustain us. This is not just our right, it is our responsibility. We are all caretakers of the land. However, colonial policies, including Saskatchewan's Trespass to Property Act, create barriers that limit our Indigenous people from exercising these rights. This law contradicts the spirit and intent of the treaties, which were meant to establish shared use of land, not restrict access to it. Laws like these disrupt our ability to hunt, fish, gather in the ways our ancestors intended, while failing to recognize the role of Indigenous stewardship plays in maintaining ecological balance. Absolutely. I really wanted to highlight that comment because it's more than just accessing the land for hunting. For some people, it is. They're hunting for sustenance to share with their families and their communities. And overall, though, it's a greater purpose to it, our way of as our way of life, right? Our languages come from the land, our teachings come from the land. We need to have access, and also that responsibility and relationship that we have, the stories that come to creating that balance. There's so much, and we could do another webinar just on that, so I won't go on, but I just wanted to thank you for sharing that perspective, that it goes beyond hunting just for hunting, that it's a very interconnected, interdependent relationship. So thank you for that. I wanted to make sure I get anybody else who has a question, make sure you have time before we close off for the evening. Okay, so I know we've had lots of comments as well. If you have any questions about the Treaty Land Sharing Network, you can always go to our website, which is treatylandsharingnetwork.ca. And there are a lot of resources there for Indigenous land users, those who have land to share. And really what this is about too is it is people living and honoring the treaty responsibilities that we have here in Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 territories. And so we're always available to answer any questions. Valerie.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure you see Krista, I think it is, question in the chat there. I just want to make sure you're seeing those comments right
At the very bottom here. Okay, so there's
a question for Tom.
Oh, I see it now. Yes, right above. Okay. Chris, I have a question for Tom. Thank you, Val. What sort of conversations have you had with your neighbors since your Treaty Land Sharing Network signs went up? Have they raised concerns or been curious? So Tom, that one's for you.
Okay, so yes, a couple things is that right around me where our home base is, I rent some land, and I brought the conversation to them. Two of them actually signed up with the Treaty Land Sharing Network and posted their signs. We did have an event out at our place a couple of years ago, and I made the initiative to, send an invite out to a number of them. A few did show up. So, everything was sort of positive. The other thing that I've had is I had one guy come in to my yard, and he saw the sign, and he said, "Well, what's that all about?" And I told him, and he sort of just kind of rolled his eyes and left. Another guy asked exactly the same question, but his response was, totally different. He actually said, "Where do I find out about this?" And so I just texted him the link to it, and I says, follow up with the information there, and if you want to sign yours up, you can too. And he's another cattleman. He lives a few miles from me, about 7 or 8 miles, and so it's kind of a mixed bag. But for the most part, it's kind of been positive.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate that perspective. And that's a really key part for those who are signing up is these conversations. We know from living in Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 territories that there are a lot of tensions. There's a lot of misunderstandings. And that won't change until we start doing things differently. And that's what I appreciate about the people who have signed on to the network is, again, not waiting for policy to change, but creating change at this level, neighbor to neighbor, person to person. and I find it to be very meaningful. One question that we have here is from Ross: what do you need to keep the network going? So this is a wonderful opportunity. Thank you, Ross, for asking that question, because we could always use some support. This is a very, very grassroots initiative. We put many, many volunteer hours into the network to share the message, to encourage others to join, to make sure that there is access, safe access for Indigenous land users. So if you do go to treatylandsharingnetwork.ca, we do have a donation button there that you can click on, because one of the things is, we do have some access to different grants and some sources, but they can be few and far between. And so we are always looking for support to help with, administrative costs and that kind of thing, to provide, treaty materials and just to keep it going. But it is mostly driven by passion, volunteer work, and a lot of love for the work that we're doing. But we could always use the support. And then we're always looking to grow the network too. So if you know of others who are curious, want to find out more, if you could share that. That's the other way too, is by sharing on social media about the work that we're doing, encouraging those to reach out, ask some questions. We're very accessible and happy to answer the questions that anybody might have about either accessing land, or if you have land to share and provide access to, and any concerns that you have. If you have any desire to become a member, we really welcome you to. And if you have questions, we're happy to answer that as well. There is a process to follow that way. But at the very end of the webinar here, we'll put the main screen up, and I think there's a QR code there too that can help take you to that place if necessary, or if you could do that as well. So we are right at time here as we're wrapping up, 8:29. So just very, very quickly from everybody here, if there's any kind of last things that you want to say, like Tom, Shirley, Brian, I really appreciate you taking your evening to spend time with us and answer questions and have this conversation. There's more questions, I think, even more so now after this conversation. But any last things you want to share quickly before we wrap up for the evening?
I will. Can I just share something?
Yes,
Michelle?
Shirley. Yes,
Yes.
please. Thank you.
Well, I just want to share that Indigenous people were the first conservationists, and they were very well, and they did it very well. And all that had been spoken of here. And Chris from Vancouver, I appreciate your comments. And yes, from time immemorial, the Indigenous people were the best conservationists there was around. And I can only see this going forward in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Brian or Tom?
I guess I could go next. First of all, I'd like to thank Tom and his family. Much appreciated. Thank you for sharing your land the way that you do. As well as to Shirley, thanks for your great knowledge sharing. It's really good listening to you. And to Luke, thank you for the invitation for tonight. Michelle, it was great listening to you. I thank you for all the work that you do on behalf of all, not just First Nations, but for the non-First Nations, and ways of getting all of us together, I guess, to help make this thing work out. And I look forward to the next one. If you'd like me to participate again, I'd be more than willing to.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian. It was a pleasure meeting you, and I look forward to more collaboration in the future too.
So I hope to meet everybody someday.
Good. Tom?
Yeah, no, thanks, Michelle and Luke and Nathaniel for hosting this thing. And like I said, nice to meet Brian and hear from Shirley again. And it's interesting to see some of the comments coming here and some of the discussions that are going on in the chat. So if you haven't taken time to look at them, take a peek through them. So.
Yes, I agree. The chat is full of information and dialogue, and it's wonderful to see that. So we do have resources as well on our website, and we're always looking to add more. So just know that you can go there to find out more information, and then follow us. Again, we're on Facebook, Instagram, plus there's our website and an email newsletter if you want to sign up for that to be on top of any events that we have coming up, as well as announcements of other webinars, and just ways that you can support us and get involved and learn more. Thank you all for all of your time today. And I really appreciate you spending 90 minutes of your evening with us. And with that, it is just 8:33. So I just want to draw your attention to the screen. And here is where you can find out more about the work we're doing. And again, just want to thank the Faculty of Arts at the University of Regina for supporting us in this webinar tonight. And thank all of you for coming here and listening and sharing your contributions in the chat and your questions, and for your interest in the Treaty Land Sharing Network, and to everyone who's made this network what it is today and as it continues to grow. Thank you very much. Have a really wonderful evening. I send blessings to each and every one of you, to your home fires for this evening, and look forward to connecting with you again in the very near future. Thank you so much.
Guavman Minoa,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you. Good